Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I'm so glad that you stopped in to listen in today. You are in for a treat. The Vice President of Client Services at Zeroedin, Keith Goode, joined me today. And Keith really has this great combination of being very techy, but being great with people. And he has really combined that to help elevate the voice of HR. And he's doing that through some predictive models with HR analytics. And wait till you hear him talk about how we really follow, how he can follow people from the time they are hired, interviewed, step in the door, all the way to the time that they leave us. And you're going to want to really hear about this tool and how to use it and how this might help you when it comes to all of your HR and people needs. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have got a tremendous leader to get today that I don't want to waste any time. I want to get right to him because I want to get as much advice and find out about this amazing work that he's doing. And so without further ado, the Vice President of Client Services at Zeroedin, Keith Goode, has joined me today. Keith, it is so great to connect with you today. How are you doing there, sir?
Doing great, Kenny. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to diving in and getting to know you and a little bit better and talking about this important topic.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. It's my honor. You're really passionate about several things, leadership development being one of them, but your next gen people analytics. There's so many innovative things that you and your company are doing that I can't wait to find out about. But I'm curious first to hear your backstory as to what led you to kind of, really settle in this space of really helping HR and training and leadership development. Tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, so here at Zeroedin, I've been here for more than 20 years, and I have about 30 some years experience in the technology space, mostly around HR data. My passion and expertise lies in generating value from data. I'm particularly excited about the opportunities found in HR and HR analytics. I have to admit the state of HR analytics is kind of unique right now. There's a kind of reminds me a little bit of the old high school sex. Everybody's talking about it. Everyone says they're doing it. Everybody thinks they know how to do it, but in reality, it's still early and people are just learning about it. So it's a great topic. My background has been in technology, and I think there's a lot to offer. I've always wake up every morning thinking about what next value can we add to our clients based off their data.
Wow, that's awesome, and you're right. I think that as I was starting to research this topic, it was your name that kept coming up, so there's not a ton of other folks that are really looking at HR from a perspective that you're looking at, which I think is awesome. So let's get into it. Walk us through what exactly is next gen people analytics and start to talk a little bit about how that really helps with human resources.
Yeah, and I think the first good place to think about is from an HR perspective. So in medium to large organizations, HR is unique in the fact that they typically use what's called best of breed systems. So they may have a system for payroll, a different system for learning management, a different system for performance. Yes, there are some systems that offer a lot of that in one environment, but in many medium to larger organizations, they look for that best of breed approach. And there are great systems out there. However, what it ends up is that HR is then kind of saying, well, how is my performance impacted by my learning, impacted by my pay, impacted by the number of people that are working overtime, and other data factors. And it's typically spread over a lot of different systems, and not just systems, but then over time, a lot of these best of breed environments may change. You go from one learning management system to the next. So now you've got this gap in data over time as well, not to mention the silos. So really the value that we add is bringing this data together so we can correlate and then provide it back to the HR people or line managers so they can make better decisions about their employees from looking at everything across the board, not just learning, not just performance, not just skills, not just pay, but bringing it all together and seeing how those work together to make effective employees.
Oh, and that is fascinating, and it makes sense. And you're right. I haven't worked for many companies in my life, thank goodness. But the last few companies I worked for, there were different systems
Yeah.
for for each. And you're right. It doesn't tell the full story. So Keith, I want to go back. And does this impact hiring any? Like, how does this play in when it comes to sitting down for the interview and actually making a hiring decision?
Kenny, that's a great question. And I think, hiring another one of those silos often, and by pulling in this HR data and looking at an organization's history of employees, that data can now be used and combined with AI and machine learning to help hire the more effective people. They can look at history of who did well in the organization and why and where they came from, and some key attributes that might be embedded in other systems. And now they can bring that forward and looking at the HR candidate or the candidates from the HR system to help either filter out or bring to the top, or look at people that may otherwise not have been looked at. So it's all about getting the right people, and the data can be used in supporting that decision.
Wow. And so critical today, right? Where, when you have that unfortunate mistake hire, it really could set you back in our environment, especially today, and especially in the combination with virtual world and in person. So HR, and I love this because you talk about how this elevates the voice of HR, because sometimes in a lot of companies, HR is kind of more in the background. It's just a necessity. Or we tend to think that, or we go to them when we have to fire somebody, but you really want HR with what you're putting together here to be at the forefront. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Kenny. So that's exactly right. So, one of the unique aspects about what we do with our clients is not only are we collecting that HR data from those siloed systems, but we work with a lot of our clients where we're pulling in other business related data, whether it's sales, whether it's productivity information, and sometimes even outside data. For example, we've brought in weather data for a company that had people that would go outside and work outside on
Wow.
vehicles and other things. So,
Wow.
we wanted to know, how does weather impact performance for those types of jobs out there. We even had clients in the retail space where not only are we pulling in hours and pay and learning from an HR perspective, but actually sales all the way down to the product SKU level sales. And from a retail perspective, we can even pull in a key measurement called shrink, which is the loss of inventory, and then correlate that to whether it's distribution centers or salespeople. One of our retail organizations were using that to make. Then they were looking at their employees and the productivity of the employees, and then giving the ones that are higher level of productivity better time slots to work, and that equated to a huge savings, a huge increase in revenue that they were able to account for. Now the HR people are able to bring that back to the meetings that they're having with the head of sales or the head of productivity or the head of distribution, and speak the same language.
Wow. Wow. You're really, really looking at the whole picture. I'm still I loved everything you said, but man, oh man, looking at things like the weather for
Yeah.
folks like that, and then I'm thinking even of the time slots of out here in New York, there's endless highway construction, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you'll drive by, man, those poor guys and ladies that are out there working in the sunlight, but maybe you look at someone more that would be more productive working in the evening, when it's not as hot, in the summer. That is just fantastic. Um, how have you seen, Keith? How have you seen leaders adapt to this? Of those frontline leaders, have you seen an embrace of this? Because you probably really work hard at getting the folks in the C-suite and executives on board with this. How do those frontline leaders adapt to this?
That's a great point, and things are changing, Kenny. I just heard a statistic or a information bite that says, most organizations are now looking at, people in their late 20s, early 30s as the next executives for organizations. So it's almost like it's almost skipping a generation.
Yeah.
I think things are definitely changing. There's definitely people that are embracing the technology, the data. And of course, there's still some that are somewhat skeptical. I have to admit, but it's about often that first step is bringing things. It's an augmentation to the decision making process. So
Mm,
it's not replacing it; it's an
right.
augmentation to it, and I think that's an important concept to make.
Oh, no doubt, right? And I would think that the more information I have, the better, I could make a really good decision as well as involving other people. Um, it's so interesting. We were talking about before we got on the air here, we were talking about a common name that we knew from the world of politics here on Long Island. And I watched a video where the city of Detroit and their government was looking to come on board with you guys, and the folks that were in it, they were totally sold. The folks that presented this,
Wasn't that a great
to
video in
it's a
front of the city council?
I loved it. And Keith, talk a little bit more about that because this is so wide ranging across all industries. And you think about a government industry really looking at having their people be as productive as possible and really want to creating a space for them to be there for a long time as well, employee longevity and bringing down turnover. Talk a little bit more about that as well and how this really spans across a lot of industries.
Yeah, it does, and we work with a lot of public organizations like the city of Detroit. We do a lot of work in the federal space as well, and a lot in the DoD space. But first of all, it's the city of Detroit. What an amazing city, an amazing turnaround. We know about the history there, and I, that is such a unique place and organization to work with. They're really embracing the historical amount of data that they have. From an IT perspective, yes, there's definitely challenges with the data, and there's a lot of effort there. But there's also a lot of energy behind looking at that and getting value from it. One of the unique things that we've are doing with them now is that is fairly common in municipalities and organizations. That's a little bit different from private organizations is we created a measure called turnover savings. So in the public space, a lot of organizations, they budget for a year of positions. And a lot of times that's done in finance, and it's done often in a spreadsheet. And they don't actually put people in those positions. They're just identifying the position. And that's coming from a finance perspective. Then they
Mm,
throw it over the fence to the HR organization that are dealing with people that are moving day in, day out from one organization to the next, from one job to the next. They're bringing in people, their people are leaving. So marrying up that budget data for the year and the actual turn and churn of employees is quite a challenge. So we've been able to accommodate that. And again, there's no common unique identifier between the two. So we've had to build that out. And now it gives the city a better look at from a month to month basis, a quarter to quarter basis. What are our empty positions? What are our filled positions? Where are people that aren't in a budgeted position? And then on top of that, they can look at those changes throughout the year and say, say, well, we budgeted X for this position, but during the year or during any given period within the year, that position was empty. So that's a savings.
Wow.
That's a
Yeah.
savings that we budgeted for.
Big
So what
time.
can we do with it? They're looking at, can it fund merit increases and merit pay for people that are, stepping up to the plate and doing more. So they're using that budget that may otherwise have gone unknown, unnoticed, to actually either increase pay for key people, for good causes, and driving that forward.
That's awesome. And as you're talking, I'm hoping and praying that my retail and restaurant folks out there and are listening, because the turnover is still ridiculous
It is.
in these industries. Not all companies, right? There's some companies that are really doing it well, but you think about the money that just goes out the back door. Person just didn't work out, and after 30 days, they're gone. It's crazy. And I love what you're doing, and I love how it was highlighted there in a government agency, and
Yeah.
that they were very, aware of the savings that was going to happen. It was just so interesting to watch them sell it to the two guys sitting at the
It
table,
was.
right? It's
Yeah, it
very,
really was.
yeah, it's very
And
interesting.
Kenny, if you don't mind me
Of
adding
course,
on to that. So,
please.
you talked about turnover, especially in the retail space. In a lot of analytic systems out there in HR space, will tout a key element called flight risk. It's the ability to determine or to predict who might be at risk of leaving an organization, because we know, and especially in retail, when there's people, you spend money to bring a person on, you spend money to train them, and then they leave and you're back to square one. And don't forget, there's an opportunity cost, especially in the sales space. Where are those people that you just trained going? Might be going to a competitor. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot at risk when a person leaves an organization. And so, predicting values isn't a new thing. There's always been models out there statistical models to help predict values. And we've are able to use some new machine learning algorithms that have won awards for other types of predictions. And we work with our clients to determine, every organization is different. So we look at working with them and say, well, what factors do you think impact turnover? And then we will create a model and we'll see, okay, well, are those the right factors? And using AI now, here's what's interesting, is that every prediction is unique in the fact that AI learns from the data and says, oh, well, I've got someone that has these features, these elements. So I'm going to use statistical methods based off of learning from the history or decision trees, and then using a statistical method to come up with a prediction. So what that means is that every prediction is fairly unique. And we use this algorithm in retail space, where in the retail space, you have, very high turnover in, say, stores and distribution, but in the corporate office, it's a fairly normal turnover, very low turnover. So a lot of organizations in the past would do two different models, one for the retail people, one for the back office, and maybe one for distribution. So having using an AI model lets you use one model, and it learns that, oh, well, this person's in retail, so I'm going to look at these features, and it will determine a prediction. So you don't have to break the people into different models. The machine learning starts learning about each record, and then we take that a step further, because as an end user, you're saying, yes, I see that you predicted this person to be a potential flight risk. Why? And a lot of systems stop right there. They say, well, we just, looked at all this data and this is what it came up with. So we've created what we call explainable AI that takes any prediction and it takes it back through the model and says, well, for this person, it looked at how many times they were demoted, how many times they had a pay increase, how far do they work from the office, as opposed to another person that it uses different features from the model to come up with that prediction. So that helps the person that's looking at the manager looking at a person that might be a high flight risk to say, hey, I noticed that, you're commuting awfully long. Maybe there's something we can help you with that to keep you to stay. Versus, another person says, we see that you haven't had a promotion in a while. Maybe you need a higher level to keep you to stay. So it's using machine learning to perform managerial tasks quite differently.
Yeah, I'm so glad you. That was going to be my next question. You answered it beautifully, and I'm so glad you said that because I think this is a big difference in what you do. That you go that extra step, to then give some solutions. Keith, does this follow the employee from day one, or when does this pick up? Does it follow even before they are hired?
Well, that's a great question. From a those siloed HR systems, obviously everything is from day one, but now you've got this huge historical cache of data. So depending on what you're looking at it, and what I love about HR analytics is it's aggregated information. So it might be things about person from day one or day zero or day minus 30 because that's when the hiring process started. There's all this information in
Mhm.
that hiring process. How many sources did they click on to get interested in a position? How many interviews did they have? Who did they speak to? What were the driving factors that led them to there? And then using that to help understand, now they came on board. So day zero to day 365, that was a good hire. So let's look back at those sources and how that person got to where they did and leverage those things for the good hires. So it's actually wider than day
Wow.
zero.
Wow. That is that's amazing. And then there can be a little bit of rinse and repeat there, right? If we knew this worked, and that is awesome. So now this is leading me into getting some advice from you being a great leader on leadership development, which you're very, very passionate about. You really talk about the importance of continued leadership development. What are sometimes these analytics telling you about are leaders doing the right things? And then if you get something that says they're not, that what are some recommended next steps? So I guess what I'm asking is, what does this tell you about leadership development and where we need to be?
Oh, wow. I could tell you a lot about that. What we work with a fantastic federal agency in the Department of Defense. It's one of those three-letter agencies that I really can't talk about, but
Right.
they spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on leadership development. And they spend a lot of time on evaluating leaders through an assessment program, often a 360 assessment. And so the 360 evaluation's been around for a long time, but it's fairly difficult to implement and sustain over time. And there's so much about the process of evaluating the leaderships and identifying, so I think the first step in your answer is evaluating your leadership, evaluating your leadership programs, and then looking at that data and running it through over historical amounts of data to see what it's telling you about your leadership. And then correlating that back to your HR data to say, okay, well, this is my current staffing level, and I see these skills, these positions have people ready to age out. So how's my leadership development program supporting those skills that are about to age out, about to retire out, and where do I need to develop my leadership to support that? And I think it's all about having a good, robust assessment program, and then correlating that data back to where future looking, where you're going to see there's going to be gaps.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's telling you something, right? If let's say on Long Island, I've got very little turnover, and in New York City, I've got a lot, and it could be some different factors involved with that, but I always looked at leadership first,
Yeah.
what is leaders doing? That is just fantastic. This has been amazing. I've got one other question for you, and then I want to leave time for folks to know how they can connect with you. Um, how does all of this now put together, and what are some of the best ways? You talked about some great ways, right? When it came to even looking at the weather or putting people in different shifts. What are some other ways, Keith, that companies can really leverage their best resource, which is people, which is us? What are some of the recommendations that you make today to leverage our people even better?
I think from a data perspective, to get started, don't reinvent the wheel. And there's tremendous amount of historical cached information that I think can start gleaming information about your workforce. So often organizations out there think I need to, stop this and start something else in order to take advantage of that. And I don't think you need to stop anything. I think you need to look for a platform, a environment that can leverage what you've been doing in helping make those decisions. And from a people perspective, I think this is changing over time. I think people are coming up with more analytical skills that will be able to take advantage of whether it's algorithms or that historical aggregation of data. So those would be my recommendations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Keith, you're doing incredible work. And it is really work for us 5-10 years from now, where you're looking ahead. And I'm going to shout this from the mountaintops for sure. But how can people connect with your company and get to work with you?
Oh, first of all, for your listeners, I'd love to carry on this conversation with you or any of your listeners, Kenny. I think it's an important aspect and would be glad to talk about it. As you can tell, I get energized
Yes.
talking about it. But I can be reached through my LinkedIn at Keith A. Goode. Our company website is zeroedin.com. We're always happy to continue that conversation. And anyone that's wondering, how they can leverage their historical information, their information from multiple different systems, or even outside of the organization to leverage value, to gain more value about their workforce or about something in their organization, we'd love to have that conversation with them.
That's awesome. And there are some wonderful things on your website. So I just want to let folks know that. And it's very easy to contact you through the website, contact your company and to work with you. Keith, best of luck with this going forward. It's amazing work. It's important work. Thank you for doing it. And I hope to connect with you again.
Yeah, me too, Kenny. Thanks for bringing this out into the light. And I hope we get a chance to chat again in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we're going to leave it there. This has been Kenny and Keith. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks.